Lesson 4. Temptations of Life. When he published his book, Iacocca, an Autobiography, in 1984. This book describes very touchingly how in the midst of severe sufferings of his childhood days, the catechism, discipline and sacramental life which he received, sustained and supported him later in the difficulties and struggles of life.
Lito Anthony Iacocca, better known as Lee, was born in the Rust Belt in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1924. Trained as an engineer, he vaulted to auto industry superstardom by helping design and championing the amazingly popular Ford Mustang.
This is the car that dreams are made of.
He also fathered the world's first minivan.
Dodge Caravan, Plymouth Voyager. They're the most versatile wagons ever built in America. There's nothing like them.
With a master's degree from Princeton, Iacocca started at Ford in 1946 as an engineering trainee. He earned his reputation with Ford's racing program in the 60s, but found his place in history with the introduction of the Ford Mustang at the 1964 World's Fair.
The Mustang can be tailored to be virtually anything its buyer desires.
The Mustang was an overnight success. It spawned the American muscle car movement and is still in production today. He was named president of the company 26 years later in 1970. Despite his success at Ford, in 1978 he was unceremoniously fired by company chairman and namesake Henry Ford II, who told him, according to Iacocca's autobiography, "Sometimes you just don't like somebody." Within months he was hired at Chrysler. The next year, Iacocca was named CEO. The company was in serious financial trouble and nearly out of business. But Iacocca persuaded Washington to bail Chrysler out with $1 billion in federal loans. As part of that effort, he agreed to take a personal salary of just $1 a year. Even so, he took heat from critics when he cashed in stock options worth millions. His response was vintage Iacocca.
I mean, that's the American way. If little kids don't aspire to make money like I did, what the hell good is this country? Gotta give him a role model, right?
Iacocca was Chrysler's pitchman. He starred in 61 Chrysler commercials, touting American cars and American values.
I have one and only one ambition for Chrysler, to be the best.
He made Chrysler profitable again and paid the government back every penny. He did it with an emphasis on quality.
If you can find a better car, buy it.
Iacocca introduced longer warranties, lower prices, and a new kind of vehicle. The minivan sold so well, dealers had waiting lists 6 to 10 months long. Iacocca's quest for new models actually redefined the landscape for Detroit's Big Three. He engineered the buyout and eventual demise of number 4 carmaker American Motors, just so he could add AMC's Jeep brand to Chrysler's inventory. Iacocca chaired the commission that raised almost $300 million to restore Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty.
We remember the millions drawn here by that flame, and we renew our commitment to the ideals that kept it burning.
Iacocca was known for talking tough, and he often sounded like a politician.
The administration seems to understand the importance of bargaining chips in nuclear disarmament, for example, but they don't have the faintest idea how to bargain in trade.
In the 1980s, he resisted entreaties to run for the White House himself, but has campaigned since for both Republican and Democratic presidential candidates. Iacocca retired from Chrysler when he was 68, yet when the company presented him with a legacy award 20 years later, his vision couldn't be any clearer.
I think the Big Three is coming back.
Only one car was ever named for Iacocca, a 45th anniversary special edition Mustang produced in 2009.
Who did you expect?
Iacocca is a legendary figure in the field of
Like many
American
other
car
families of
industry.
that time, it is the solid faith in God that sustained us and helped us to go forward. We used to pray a lot. On every Sunday, we used to go to church and receive Holy Communion. In the early days, I used to doubt why it was necessary to confess before Holy Communion. But by the age of 18, I was fully convinced of the need of confession which the Church demands. I used to tell my friends about it very frankly. Later in life, each confession gave me an indescribable experience of a new life, new spirit and enthusiasm. Besides, I used to attend the retreat conducted by the Jesuit priests regularly. These things helped me always to regulate my life, to realize the difference between good and evil and thus lead a good life.
Temptations of life and how to encounter them. If we want to lead a life of faith in the midst of the temptations of this world, we must be aware of the main temptations of life and how to encounter them. Temptations are an invitation and persuasion to do evil. These may lead man to sin. God permits temptations. God helps us to face any kind of temptations. No testing has overtaken you that is not common to everyone. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tested beyond your strength, but with the testing He will also provide the way out so that you may be able to endure it. 1 Cor 10:13. It is quite natural to have worldly temptations. The greatness of a Christian is revealed in overcoming them. The modern world is led by the philosophy that everything is permissible. In such a context, greed, consumerist tendency, craze for power, unhealthy rivalry, pleasure-seeking, hero worship and such other temptations come after us in attractive forms. Greed for money. Greed is the excessive or uncontrollable desire of man to earn money. 1 Timothy 6:10. Bible looks at greed as the greatest evil. Greed for money is an obstacle to enter heaven. Earning wealth becomes immoral when money is earned through exploitation. Man places money in the place of God. Greed for money is idolatry. The 10th commandment forbids uncontrolled amassing of material things. This commandment forbids the evil desire that rises from the craze for money and power that comes along with it. It also forbids the desire to do injustice in the case of material things and thus offend the neighbors. 2. Vainglory, false pride. Vainglory is inordinate self-esteem. It is a personality defect like inferiority complex. Vainglory is one form of pride. When a person considers himself better than what he really is, he becomes a slave to false pride. When he keeps exaggerated ideas about one's family, wealth, education, employment, positions etc., it becomes vainglory. Ultimately it leads to the downfall of individuals and misery of people. St. Paul says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. Let each of you look not to your own interests, but to the interests of others." Philippians 2-3, 4. 3. Consumerism, consumerist craze. Materially it is the desire to use worldly things excessively for one's own comfort and pleasure. When worldliness goes beyond limits, we fall into passions and sensory pleasures. Advertisements, provoking instincts, attractions of life and conveniences put forward by modernity, undue eagerness to seek comfort etc. produce in human minds an unquenchable desire to enjoy material goods and comforts to the maximum. Desire for power. Desire for power is the tendency to misuse the power and position for one's own selfish gains, instead of using them for service of humanity. Greed for money, vainglory etc. tempt a person to have desire for power. Autocrats like Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, Mao Zedong etc. were slaves to desire for power. When we look at authority as an end in itself, instead of a means to serve, it becomes dangerous. (5) Prodigality. It is excessive use of money. Prodigality is excessive use of resources. We cannot justify the prodigality displayed in family and community celebrations like marriage, birthdays and feast days. Misuse of earth and water is also prodigality. 6. Craze for luxuries. It is an excessive desire for jewels and other things to adorn one. It is a danger fast growing through the influence of medias and other decorative advertisements. This culture diffuses through blind imitation of sports stars and film stars. Globalization also helps to increase this fashion craze in young minds. We see the presence of riches, comforts and luxuries on one side and the tears and lamentations and groans of the poor who have no food to eat on the other side. In such a milieu, craze for luxurious things is a threat to social justice and is immoral. (7) Pleasure-seeking. It is a lifestyle looking only for pleasure using the comforts and conveniences obtained and obtainable. This is another temptation remaining close to craze for luxury. God's command is to work and earn bread. But man has a tendency to remain idle. Luxury and idleness goes hand in hand. Human life does not terminate with the end of the life in this world. It is meant for eternal life. Hence we should be careful not to lose eternal joy by indulging in the pleasures of this world. (8) Unhealthy competitions. Excessive rivalry in curricular and extracurricular activities may lead children to hypocrisy, quarrel. In today's globalized world, the principle of survival of the fittest is prominent in life. The weak, the retarded, the old and the sick have no place in this world. Muscle power succeeds everywhere. The immoral trend "goal justifies means" is growing as a slogan of today. The noble thought that existence is coexistence gives way to another trend of thought, namely all are enemies among themselves. This attitude is quite contrary to Christian charity. 9. Hero worship. A person trapped in the circle of material things forgets God and makes himself God and turns to be an idol worshipper. It is because of selfishness that man worships persons as God. We must respect persons who confronted life in an extraordinary way and succeeded. We must imitate their exemplary model. But it should not become worship. Heroes should not be made gods. Conclusion. Christian life is a pilgrimage. The goal of this pilgrimage is heaven. It is a journey to the Father with Christ. A Christian should have the power of faith to overcome anything that keeps him away from this God. This world is full of temptations. In such a situation, the faithful need diligence, discernment and precaution to conquer such temptations and progress.
Let us enlighten our hearts. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. James 3:16-17.
What inspiration did you get from the life story of Iacocca, the legendary figure in the field of American car industry? How will you overcome the temptations of life? Thank you, and may God bless us all.